Okay, let's begin. Second line from the top. So we are continuing to discuss what happened between Avraham Avinu and the Malachim. And it's interesting, just before we start, a little thing that we had in Gemara Shabbos that we learned from that incident of Avraham Avinu and the Malachim that Gedola Hachnosas Orchim Yosem Mekabbalah Shchina. And Achnas is even greater than Shechina because Avraham Avinu told the Eibishter to wait while he's out there trying to invite the Malachim. So everyone asked the question, how do you see Gedolah? Or you see that they're equal. And Avraham Avinu elected to go Mekabel Orchid. Doesn't mean necessarily it's greater. So there's a story, Rameir Shapiro from Chachlu Lublin went to America to raise funds for his yeshiva. And obviously, he just came from Poland, and he was dressed the full attire as a Polish chassid. And he, since he's a founder of Daf Yomi, so it's appropriate to tell the story. So he goes to one particular house. And the man of the house was a very wealthy man, and he knocked on the door, hoping that he would be invited in and he could raise some money for his yeshiva. But there was a big sun window in the front, and he was able to see that this person looked through the window to see who was at the door, and he sees Rameir Shapiro, and that person understood immediately why Rameir Shapiro was there. So he went and he hid behind his couch, and he can see, Rameir Shapiro can see that he's telling his son, he couldn't exactly hear the words, but he realized what's happening. He's probably telling his son that he's not home. Anyway, the son opens the door, and he says, Rameir Shapiro, what he wants, I would like to see your father. So he tells him that, sorry, my father's not home. So Rameir Shapiro says, do me a favor. Tell your father, I want to give him a big yeshikeach. There's a Gemara that was always bothering me, and I finally understand the Gemara. It just hit me. The penny dropped. The Gemara says that Gedolah Achnas is Orchim Yosim Mekabel. And everybody asks, where do you see in the story that he's Gedolah? Maybe it's the same. It's equal. So now I figured out why exactly. When Moshe Rabbeinu saw the Shechina for the first time, by the snare, he covered his face. And your father, when he has the opportunity of doing the mitzvah, he covers his whole body and hides behind the couch. So I can understand now what it means. Anyway, we're up to the Gemara here, 2 lines to the top. It says by Avraham Avinu, ve'etcha pas lechem. Then, and we had all discussion of he did on his own, he had someone else doing on his behalf. And we explained in the Shir on Friday that the machlekes is how do we understand shlichus? If the shlichus is an extension of shalech, or the shliach is an independent person, but the credit goes on shalech, and that's the difference in the Gemara's argument, whether it's considered as if Avraham himself did it or the youth did it independently. Anyway, Ksivit says, it says, first he says, I'll take bread, and then it says, well, what did he actually do? Well, he ran and chased after the cattle. Here we have a rule. Tzadikim oimri ma'at, they say they'll do very little, like a loaf of bread, yet va'oisim harba, but they do far more than that. He said he gave them, as we learned yesterday, 3 tongues, a tongue per person. Rishayim oimim harba, they speak a lot, but they don't do anything. Minolan, how do they don't do anything? From Ephraim. What is he about Ephraim? Mikorik, say first he's so generous, and he says, take the land and bury Sarah, won't charge you, and so on and so forth. Then he says, Eretz arba meya shekel kesef. He says, 400 shekel kesef, what is it? What's the big deal? All of Seiks, and then goes even further, Vayishma Avram, Avram listened to Ephraim, Vayishka Avram left the kesef, he gave him the money, he spoke about and he gave him 400 coins, arba meya shekel kesef, this is coins that it can be effective anywhere in the world. So first of all, first he told me, I'll pay nothing. I'll charge you nothing. Then he charged him $400, and not just 400 shkolim, but oivel asechem. In fact, there's a beautiful word. It says in Rashi there. He says, Avram says, he says, the guy says, I'll charge you for it. He says, I wish I gave it to you. And Rashi said, I wish I gave it to you before we had all these discussions. So the Foshim ask, what does it mean? What's the difference if he does it now or paid it before? So he said like this, Beini ubeincha mahi. Avraham Avinu said to Ephraim, where did you get this idea of 400 shkolim? Why 400? Where did it come from? It's an outrageous sum, but where did 400 come from? You know where it came from? Because Beini Ubeincha, the middle letter in my name, the middle letter in your name, you're Ephraim. So the middle letter is a Reish, two on the side and the other side. And my name is Abraham. My middle letter is Reish. So you combined the two together and you said Beini Ubeincha, what's the middle letter in each name? Mahi, what is it? And that's what you came up with 400. So he says, I wish I wish I gave you, and we had negotiations before my name became Abraham. Before they added the hey, and my name was only Avram, I would have had a middle letter at all, that I wouldn't even have to pay you $200. Anyway, that was part of the negotiations, but didn't work for Avram. Ella, country, the eco correlate the tickle country. What he gave was country, these are coins that are accepted worldwide, universally. Ksiv, Kemach, Avram instructs Sarah, Kemach is coarse flour, Uksiv Silas, and it says in the Pasuk Silas, which is fine flour. So which one was it? Kemach? Or was it Silas? You don't put together Kemach and Silas. So what do you mean Kemach Silas? So we darshan, it says in Avraham bin Iran, and they went to Sarah, and he said, get 3 saw of Kemach Silas. So we say there was a conversation there. Big machlekes in the first exactly how to learn Pshat here. But Amar Abitcham, Kanchi Isha Tzara Ein Eba Archim Yosem Ish. A man, generally most people are stingy. They don't really want to give too much to the guests, and their wives are even stingier. So the way that Rashi learned the conversation was, she said, let's get kemach, coarse flour, and he said, Silas, fine flour. Others say, that other way around. Avram is the one who said kemach, because he wanted to show the malachim that Sarah and tzedekah she is. And in contrast to other hosts and hostess, they always look, if you have guests, you always find cheap things, and the cheaper, the better. So he gave her a way out, and then he said, oh, you want to, let's make kemach. And she came back and said, Silas. And Avram knew that she would say Silas, but he wanted the guest to realize how generous Sarah was. He said, let's do kemach. She's the one who came up with the idea of Silas. See what it says further. Then he said that bring 3 soim, make kemach Silas, lushi v'asi ugus. Lushi, nidem v'asi ugus, and make these round things. As the Mefarshim say, and so this was Pesach time. And that's why Pesach time there was matzahs, and that's why he said, lushi nida vasi ugus. And if you read the Shuvas, when they started making machine matzahs, those who opposed machine matzahs, one of the reasons, it sounds in others, the reason opposed machine matzahs is because it says ugus. It says here, it says later in Torah as well. Matzahs have to be round, and all machine matzahs are square, and therefore they had an issue with that. Anyway, see what it says. He took butter and milk, uben abakar and cattle. The evil lechem la'isa kamayim. It seems they didn't bring any bread. Why not? By the way, the Chassam Sofer says, the Das Kenim, the whole thing about Kenim Baltesis, because they mixed Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Malachim, you're not entitled to the Torah because you mixed the milchiks and the fleishiks. You guys were down in this world. You ate chema v'cholov, you ate ben bakar. The Chassam Sofer says, how did Abraham Avinu give them meat and milk together? It's also bachil, it's also bahanon, everything. So he says that look at the order. First he gave them the milchiks. When they finished that, then he brought them the fleishiks. Anyway, Amar Ephraim Aksha. Ephraim, the cucumber seller. Aksha, he was a cucumber seller. So Ephraim, the cucumber seller, Talmida Shel Rab Meir, the student of Meir. Interesting that you call a Tana by their parnasa that they had. We did have a few Tanaim called by the parnasa that they had. But Avram was very machmir. Everything that he ate in his house, even though it was chulin, he treated it as if it was kachim. So he ate it betara. And what happened was, Vesari Imenu, that day she was a nida, and therefore everything became tummy. First of all, how did Sarah become a nida? When we know that she's 90 years old, she couldn't have any children, and when she was told she'll have a child, she laughed. She described herself that my fountain has dried up. How in the world am I going to have a child? So how does she get nida? Which is a bit problematic. So Tosfos asked the question of Rosh Hashanah, and Rosh Hashanah says that she still was a little bit youthful. She was still Paidas nida naturally, and therefore she was more worried about Avram than about herself, and that's why she said Adoni Zokin. She was more worried about Avram because Avram, was not capable at all of having children, and she, possibly. But here there's a very big debate, and one of the proofs from the debate they bring from right here. There's a general debate out there in the world. if you're a Rav in a community, the Rav Machshir, and when you're working for a community, you don't want to impose too many chumras on the caterer because it makes it very difficult, makes it very expensive. So you follow the halachas without many of the chumras. And then, but when it comes to the function and you're invited to this very function that you gave a hechsher to, you won't eat because you have chumras. And there's a big debate if that's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. If you don't eat it, what right do you have to give a hechsher to everybody else? Or do we say, personally, I'm more machmir and therefore I won't eat? And there's a big debate. So here, one of the rayas that brings from right here, Avram Avinu was machmir that he will eat chulin al taras hakodesh. Okay, so that's why you don't give it to these three guests. They don't have the chumrah about eating chulin al taras hakodesh. So give them the bread. So what if she's a niddah? So what if it became tameh? So what? Most people will eat chulin tameh as well. So the fact that Avram Avinu didn't give it is because Avram Avinu felt if I won't eat it, how can I give it to them? So that's the proof that some of them bring that that's how one should behave. You give a hechsher, you should eat it yourself. Others say there's no proof from here. The issue here was totally different. The issue here was it was Pesach. And when she became a niddah, she sort of paused. And remember, you have to knead the dough and everything else within 18 minutes. And Avraham Avinu was worried that maybe it became chametz. That's a whole different story. And he doesn't want to give chametz, doesn't have chametz, doesn't want to give chametz to anybody. And that's why he declined of giving them bread. So therefore, there's no proof from here regarding the issue we just mentioned before. The Gemara continues. Ayam Relov said to him, Aye Sarah Ishtacha, where is Sarah your wife? They said to Avram, where's Sarah? Ayam, he said, Ine Ba'oil, she's in her own room. The idea, he wanted to notify them. She's so remained tznuah, that she's very discreet, and now that she's in Israel, she's on her own. Omar Rav Yehud Amar Rav, Yoidim Hay Malachas Shas remained Ba'oil. He said, these are Malachim. They knew where Sarah was. And yet, why did they ask? Elamai Ba'oil. The reason why they asked this question is not for their own knowledge, but for Avram's knowledge, that he should appreciate who his wife was and how special she was. Rabbi Yosef Rachanina, the reason why they asked is they wanted to send kosher bracha. You remember in the beginning of brachas, Rab Nachman forgot to send kosher bracha to his wife, to Yalta, and remember how she broke all the barrels of wine. She was so angry. It was a big thing to drink the leftover wine from benching, called kosher bracha, and therefore they wanted to pass it on to her. It says in the passage that the Malachim spoke to Avram, and they said to him, where is Sarah, your wife? So the letters Aleph, Yud, Vav from the word Elav have dots on them. So the question is, why do they have all these dots? And we know that if the dots are more letters than letters that don't have dots, then we dashen the letters that do have the dots. If you take out from the word the lamed, what you have left is Ayoy. They asked him, where is Sarah? They asked him where Sarah is. A person goes to Aksanya, you should ask about the people in the family and the wife as well. Big machlek is Rashi and Tosis. Tosis was very machmir. Rashi says that you're not allowed, you don't talk directly to the wife, but you can talk to the husband. You can even ask the husband, so how's your wife doing? How is she feeling? According to Tosis, the only thing you're allowed to ask the husband is your wife here? You're not allowed to even say to her husband, how is your wife feeling? Okay, and in Shulchan Aruch and Even Ezer, believe it or not, Simchaval, it passes like Rashi. But you're not allowed to forget about having a discussion with the wife. We haven't picked it up. It's talking about speaking to the husband, but speaking to the husband, you're allowed to be permitted to ask, how is your wife? How is she feeling? Says the Gemara, Bava Mishmul Ein Shem Shem Shaklal. I did buy the shine to the husband you're allowed to. What do you mean for the husband you're allowed to? I just told you the machlek is Rashi and Tesis. Anyway, when Sarah heard that she's going to have a child, so she obviously doubted the whole thing, and she said, she couldn't believe it. She found it incredulous. Then after I dried up, suddenly I'm going to become wet again, or able to become fertile again. She's saying after the labasa dried up, the rabu hakamatin and all the connection and the folds are there. This adan habasav and his pashtu hakamatin v'chaza yefilim b'kaimai. What happened was that she became once again fertile, and all the aging signs disappeared, and she became as beautiful as young as beautiful as she was when she was young. Ksiva says about Doini Zokin. She said about Doini Zokin that she did not have confidence in Avram. And yet, Uksiv, when Hashem repeated to Avram, it said, Vaniza Kanti. He was repeating to Avram, he said, and Sarah said that I'm the one who's aging. The Leimoisi V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kid Amra Ihi. The Ebershter did not want to relate to Avram exactly what she said. And why? Because Tony Rebbe Shmuel, Gogol Shalom, having Shalom bias, is that important? I feel like Kodesh Baruch Hu Shina, even the Ebershter altered what she said in order to keep Shalom bias. And it says, but Tischak Sarah Bekirba, she couldn't believe that her husband was able to bear children. He changed her words. Others say that there is, even for Shalom Bayis, there's a limit how much you can lie. But she found it incredulous. She was talking about both. I'm not capable, and nor is my husband. So the Abishah didn't change her words. He just omitted, you're not allowed to lie, but you don't have to say the whole truth. He omitted the part where she said about herself and just a part that she said about Avram and only relayed what she said about herself. So it didn't actually change the words. So the machlekes are showing him how far we take Shalom Bayis, how far we take it. Talking about it further, she said, Mi mil Avram, who's going to tell Avram, Henika Bonim, Sora, Kama Bonim Henika Sora. That day when she was nursing Yitzchak, she also was nursing others. What does that mean? In that day, that Gomel, which according to this means he was weaning off nursing, because others in Medrash it says Gomel also means he made that big party. It was the day that he became Bar Mitzvah. Is that day that she weaned Yitzchak off. Also, Suda made a massive party, to celebrate the fact that Yitzchak was able to be nursed and everything else. Everyone was mocking them. Have you ever seen an elderly couple in their years, 190? Look what happened there. They found some kid lying there in the street. They claim, this is our son. Not only that, they made a big party. Isn't that suspicious? Most people don't make a big party. You know why they make a big party? To cover up the truth. They want to corroborate this story. Ma osa Avram Avinu. What did he do? Holach v'zimin kol gedolei hadar. He invited all the gedolei hadar. The Medrash says he also invited Og Melech HaBashan, and there's a whole story there. The Sari Menu and Sarah Zim Neshna Shasayim. She invited all the women. So he invited all the men, and she invited all the women. Every single one of them brought their child with them, without their nursemaid. Umenikla, and she and Sarah went ahead and nursed every single child miraculously. They did not bring their nursemaid. But a miracle happened. Suddenly it was unlimited. The source of milk, and she was able to nurse every single child, but it didn't placate them at all. They were still teasing. Okay, Sarah was proven that she's capable. But Avram ben Meir Shana, he's 100 years old. He's 10 years older. There's no way in the world they can have children. Miyad nepach cluster ponim shel Yitzchak v'nidmal Avram. Yitzchak changed and started to appear just like Avram. And then Rashi Chumash says more than from the Medrash that they actually alleged that the father of Yitzchak was Avimelech, when Avimelech had Sarah with him, and not Avram. So the Eibishter made Yitzchak appear not like Sarah, but like Avram. So then they realized what happened. So they relented. They said, Avram, they said, Avram, when they all agreed in unison that it's so it happened. So now the Gemara continues. Now there's a bit of a problem, because until Avram, very interesting, there's no such thing as aging. People live 900 years, 700 years, nobody aged. But the problem was Avram Yitzchak looked like twins. Because Avram didn't age, and miraculously Yitzchak looked just like Avram. So nobody knew who was Yitzchak and who was Avram. And whoever wanted to speak to Avram ended up talking to Yitzchak. And Bahada Yitzchak, those who wanted to speak to Yitzchak, ended up talking to Avram. Also Avram came along and Boyerachme. And he davened to Hashem. He said, you know what? From now on, if people get old in years, let them look older, let them age. So it says, Avram Zokin Bava Yamim. He's the first person that says Zokin. Then the Gemara continues. Ad Yaakov, until Yaakov, Loi have a chulshim, till Yaakov, nobody became sick. And therefore, you just died. Whatever the time is that you live, you expired. Also, Yaakov Bar Rachman, he davened and he davened, and then people started becoming sick. Remember, it says, Yosef, your father is sick. So the simple proof is, it sounded like he was the first person who was sick. But and what the reason is, so the one reason is so that that the people, he can prepare his family that he's about to depart. Rashi and Sanhedrin says the reason is that the children can make their way wherever they are to be with their parent, the father and mother, before they pass on. The Rai from this post, Natosis and Bava Basra, we'll learn soon, in Bava Basra, asks that it said Avraham Avinu carried around this amulet that people, reflected the sun and all that, and people were healed when they saw it. So people did get sick before. Yeah, so the previous sicknesses were basically you fell down, you hurt your hand, you sprained an ankle, that kind of sickness, but not an internal sickness. And Yaakov daven, there should be an internal sickness. Till Elisha came along, if you got sick, you never stood up again.
Done.
Also, Elisha came, he davened and he became well. So he was the first person that was, let's say, terminally ill, and yet he was able to recover. Shenemar, it says a pasuk, the Elisha finally became sick, but the sickness that caused him to die. In other words, he had other sicknesses, but he didn't die from them. He should have, but he didn't. The cloud, and he should have died. What are these other sicknesses? Tell them we learned. They were actually punishments. There were 3 occasions where Elisha became sick, and they were sort of punishments. He had a gabbai called Gechazi who did a number of things which were not correct, which were not right, including with Naaman, when Elisha refused to take any gifts from Naaman, and then Gechazi chased after him. He said, yeah. Elisha changed his mind, which wasn't true. And anyway, and other things happened. So Elisha chased him away. Plus, he cursed him that he should become a leper and his children forevermore. And he got punished for not accept. Gechazi wanted to do tshuva, and Elisha refused to accept his tshuva. So he's punished for that. The other one was that these young children who his gang that taunted Elisha, they said kerach ale kerach ale kerach. You rise, you're baldy. And he got very angry. It's a famous saying, no bears, no forest. He got very angry, and 2 bears came out and attacked these children and killed a number of them. So that he got punished as well. And then finally, but every time he recovered, and the echad shemeis by one of them finally died from. It says, he got sick from that sickness that he died from. Anyway, we'll go back to the Mishnah. You hire somebody, either you follow the general culture of the country, and how many days a week they work, how many hours, do you feed them, you don't feed them, and then, or if you have your own private arrangement with them. And then what happened was that Hurkas, the son, went and he hired them, and he told them that he's going to feed them, and he was told by his father that because you told them you're going to feed them, you make things worse, because you don't have to say anything. The fact that you said it means we have to give a lot more, and there's never enough. And that's how we got this whole Gemara. Because even if we gave them the meal of Shlomo HaMelech in his heyday, and we went through the list of items that he gave and they shared with everybody, it still would not be enough, because these are Bnei Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, who gave a cow per person just so they can have a full tongue. Anyway, so he told them if they didn't start, once they started working, we're committed and we're stuck. But if you didn't start working yet, so you can always change your mind. So say, I'm going to go back and tell them, all you have is bread and legumes. What did he say? Did he say pas kitnis, bread, legume bread, or did he say pas vikitnis, bread and legumes? What did he say? So different versions explain different ways, but Taisha explains that he definitely said to his son, give them bread and legumes. So that's their breakfast, that's their meal. But we're asking a general question. If he would have said legume bread, did he mean literally legume bread, which is very uncommon, or did he mean legumes and bread? He just didn't say the full sentence properly. What does he mean? Says the Gemara, I swear to you, if you want bread and legumes, not just legume bread, even though it's very uncommon, you have to add the vav. Just like you're on a boat, you have this oar. We have this long oar that you keep pushing you away from the rocks. You don't get stuck in this river called Livrois. So the same thing here. You need a long vav. You have to have the kidneys to keep them separate. Otherwise, it's legume bread. Hashem says in sort of Hakul community, Fal Hakol Shim Mailasu, you keep good water. Time we learn. Time we learn the Mishnah. Hasoichel as a pearl. You hire an employee. You tell them. Ke'echad ukishnaim b'bnei ir. I will give you like one or two people in the city. But like the average, one or two people get paid in the city. So we say, somebody can please mute themselves. We give him, we give them like the minimum amount. We find out whatever the minimum wage is, and that's what we give him. If you don't spell out that you're going to be generous, we always go for the lowest wage, and that's what you have to give them. If I say to you, I'm going to sell you a house, and I don't tell you which house, and I have 10 houses, I can give you the cheapest house if I didn't specify. The Chachamim say no. Mishamnin beinein. You work out the average. How do you work out the average? The big machlek is a shayim. One opinion of shayim is you take the lowest and you take the highest wage, and then you go right in between. And the other one says you see the majority of people what they get paid. So let's say the award wage is $20, but the majority of people get $25, and the highest wage is $40. So if you learn that it's the lowest and the highest, 20 and 40, then you give 30. But if you look at the majority of people, which are 25, then you give 25. Next Mishnah. Now that we're talking about feeding employees, for employer versus employee, we have another interesting concept. And we have a concept where that is that a worker works for you, let's say in the farm, and helps you harvest the crop. While they're harvesting the crop, they are permitted in eating from the whatever they're picking from the tree or the wheat. They can eat and chew while they're working, but they're not permitted to put it into the baskets and take it home. Because of El Kelech, you cannot put it in your baskets, but you can chew and eat while you're doing this work. Question is, so which kind of workers are able to do that? Years ago, I had a store here on Carlisle Street, and I had a worker there that was, I guess, manning the cash register, and I was caught by somebody helping himself to some of the money. So when I went to him and I asked him, "What's this?" He said to me, "It's a din of the Torah. The Torah says while you're working for somebody, you're allowed to, eat what you're doing. It's just my job is working the cash register, so this is what I'm eating." Anyway, that's not what the Gemara meant. That's not what the Torah meant at all. Especially it says you're not allowed to put it into your pockets or into your baskets. Anyway, so the Mishnah says, the elu oichlin min haTorah. The following people can eat from the Torah. The Torah mandates that you have to allow them to eat. If they are working in the field, harvesting things which are attached to the ground, when b'shaz gemar malacha, they're ready to be harvested, only then, gemar malacha, do you have the right? Because it says in the pasuk, as we'll see in the Gemara later, don't put it into your vessels, which means now it's ripe, it's ready to put in the vessels, but you should not put in the vessels, but you could eat from it. So that's we're talking about at that stage when it's ready, when it's ripe. Ubetolush, if let's say it's already been harvested, minakarka, you permit if it's been harvested, ad shalani before it became obligated to give maisa. If you piled it up, it's called miruach. Once it's piled up, we'll see the Gemara tomorrow when you chayv maisa. Once it's piled up, you cannot, and you chayv a maisa or you chayv and challah, you can no longer take from it. The other thing, your criteria is only things that grow from the ground. Only grow. It may be fruits as well, but only things that grow. But the following thing you cannot eat. If you're working, let's say, out in the fields, but but when it's not ripe, or over tolush, if it's not attached to the ground, it's been harvested. Once it's chayiv and meiser, you cannot take any of it. And even though it's chayiv and meiser, maybe you can eat Arab, but you're not allowed to. No heter from the Torah. If it doesn't grow from the ground, like if you're milking animals, that's your job. You cannot drink from the milk. Even though you're a manufacturer and all that, you're making cheese, you cannot eat from the cheese. Unless eating it just to taste and make sure that the quality is right. But otherwise, just to eat for the sake of eating, you're not allowed to. So you're going to go through and find out, how do you know this? I know he's allowed to eat. I mean, he's getting paid for his work or for her work. So what right do they have to eat at all? So the Gemara said, how do you know this entire concept that you can eat while you're in the employ of somebody and you're getting paid for the work that you're doing? The Gemara of Siva says in Pasuk, if you're going into the vineyard of your friend, it says you eat grapes, you can eat grapes to your heart's desire, you can eat. And then the Pasuk says, well, but don't put it into your vessel. So we darshan. Now what? And if you take the whole Pasuk, it says clearly that if you go in the vineyard, you can eat. Okay. Ashka cares. All we know from here is a vineyard. Call me the I don't know anything else that's growing that that you're permitted to eat from. Gamrina, we compare to kedem to vineyard. Ma kedem yuchel. What do we know about a vineyard? Dava shegedula karka grows from the ground. Ubishaz gemar melocha poilech, but you can only eat when it's ripe. And how do we know that? The Gemara will conclude in the bottom of the page because it says, "Don't put it into your baskets." In other words, because this is the time that normally people place it in the baskets because it's ripe. Af cold dovish you do the karka, anything which grows from the ground. Shas malacha, when it's ripe, poil eichel, you're allowed to eat it. Says the Gemara, but 1 second. Malakeda, maybe a vineyard, you're permitted to eat from the grapes. Shekain chayiv ba'olis. You have a mitzvah, to leave those small grapes there for the poor, or that fall down. But how you know that? So therefore, there's some generosity there. How do you know that it applies even in your case? So it answers, you know how I know? Gamrina, we learn out comma. We learn out. It says here, the next pasuk. It says in Parsha Kiseitze, if you go into not the vineyard of your friend, it says if you go into the comma is the stalks that are growing of your friend, and then you can take off, and you can pick the stalks from in your hand, but don't place a sickle there. Al comma sliacha. So it says there the word comma, and therefore because it says the word comma, therefore we say that we make a gzera shava, and you're allowed to eat other things besides grapes. Says the Gemara, but how do you know that itself? Says the Gemara, kama gufa minalam. How do you know that kama, which is, let's say, wheat? How do you know that you're allowed to eat while you're cutting the wheat? Says the Gemara, you tell me because it says over there in the next pasuk that you're allowed to eat the wheat. But how do you know? Where does it say you're allowed to eat the wheat? The Gemara, because the Chsiv says, when you go ahead and you start harvesting from the kama of your friend, which is wheat stalks, and you take it in your hand, so therefore we learn from there that it's not limited, this law that we allow the employee to eat while they're working when it's ripe is not limited only to grapes or vineyards, it even applies to wheat as well. Says the Gemara, okay, 1 second. You have a mitzvah of challah. So maybe that's why also you're allowed to eat from it. What's going on here? So what is the mitzvah of chal? And therefore what? And previously, because over there we say there's a mitzvah of oilers to give to the poor. What does that mean? It seems to me that the Gemara has a little debate here. This whole idea of an employee, eating while they're working. Why? On what basis? There's a few possibilities. Either it's because it's a mitzvah. It's nothing to do with wages. This is like tzedakah. That it's very difficult for a person working and they're hungry and they're working there with food, not to be tempted to take something for themselves. So you as an employer have to understand how your employees are working. You have to make the office settle, the setting just right. And therefore, as a mitzvah of tzedakah, let them have. That's what Gemara thinks in the beginning. Then the Gemara is going to say, maybe it's not tzedakah, but it's not wages either. It's a mitzvah. Just like you have to, give gifts to kohanim, it's a mitzvah. That you have to, like Hanukkah, which is a mitzvah to give severance pay. It's a mitzvah. And then the Gemara might conclude that it's not tzedakah, it's not a mitzvah, it's just, it's a generous thing on your part. It's nice, but you don't have to do it. So first the Gemara thinks it's tzedakah. So the Gemara says, 1 second, if tzedakah, maybe grapes because you have tzedakah oilers, you give to the poor. Maybe wheat because you give to the kohanim who don't work and they need help, so therefore you have to give them challah. How do you know where we don't have any precedence of giving tzedakah from other items that you give tzedakah to the employee? That's what the Gemara is asking. So the Gemara says further, so the Gemara challenges back. And we're sort of now asking a question on the question. How do you know? You decide that kama is limited to wheat. How do you know kama the mechayev l'chali? How do you know that kama means that it's talking about wheat, where you're chayim and kala? Dilma kol kama, anything that grows. Kama itself doesn't mean wheat. Kama means the stalks that grow. How do you know what we're talking about? Maybe anything. Why are you? The Gemara is asking a question on the person who's asking a question. So the Gemara says, and Rashi says an amazing thing that everybody wonders. Rashi says that this gzeira shava of kama, that the person who asked the question came up with, is a kama, he just made it up in order to ask the question. And the other Mephosheh, what are you talking about? Make up a gzeira. You can't make up gzeira shavas. What does it even mean? And they try to understand what's going on here. But anyway, let's continue. Dil makol kama rachman, every kind of thing that grows. So we answer asya kama. We learn out kama. It says right. It says it when you enter the kama of your friend. It says it by spheres oimer. That when do you begin counting the spheres oimer? When you do the second day of Pesach, when you make the carbon oimer, you cut down the barley, and it says in the pasuk when you begin with the sickle and you're cutting off the barley. That's when you begin counting the 7 weeks. So ma hasam kama the mechayv chala. We're talking about barley mechayv chala. Avhachanami kama mechayv chala. So you made this gzeira shava up to ask the question that kama is limited only to wheat. How do you know other things as well? Says the Gemara ikal nifrach. Malak. So this is now the Gemara is continuing the question. So now that I've established this gzeira shava, which doesn't really exist, but malak kama chala, my question goes back. Maybe kama wheat is chayiv and chala, and grapes chayiv and oilers, and that's it. Because the Torah is thinking about tzedakah to this employee. It's Rahmanas in him working with food and he's hungry. So only those other things that we normally give tzedakah from, that a man that gives tzedakah, that's where he takes it from. Says the Gemara, kerem yichir. Grapes, there's no challah by grapes. Or malakin chay by oilers. But kerem has the mitzvah to feed the poor for the oilers. Kama tichir. B'chazah, you go back and forth. Lo yiroi zeh kiroi zeh. Hatzad ha-shavim, what does both have in common? It's something gedule karka that grow from the ground, and while it's already ripe and ready, you're allowed to eat the grapes, you're allowed to eat over there the wheat. I've called anything which grows, you're allowed to eat from it. Maybe that's how we learn. Between the two, the common denominator between the grapes and the wheat. What are you talking about? Maybe that both are suitable for the mizbeach. You bring wheat to Mizbech, a carb mincha, grapes is in the sachim. And in fact, for Osanam Izais, the one other thing we're going to include is olives, the East Beitzad Mizbech, because also the oil of menachas. So now, so what? What's the point of Sad Mizbech? What does it have to do? Why would that have any bearing at all as to therefore an employee can eat for them because it has Anglin Mizbech? Again, the Gemara shifted. Okay, you're right. Giving the employee the right to eat the food is not because of tzedakah, but it's a mitzvah. In fact, the Rambam Paskins Halach L'Maisa, it's a mitzvah to allow the employees to eat. And because it's a mitzvah, we say, okay, since there's a mitzvah to do something with the grapes, in the Sachim, there's a mitzvah to work with the wheat. But other kinds of fruit and vegetables, all the other things, there is no mitzvah at all with it. Who said there's a mitzvah to give it to the employee? That's the way the Gemara is working its way through this. So the Gemara, before we go back to the Gemara, we're asking, you want to include an olive, and you say that's what the Mahatzad comes to include. What do you need to include in Mahatzad? Sometimes the Tanakh calls an olive tree a kerem. So the fact that the Torah says kerem, how do you know it doesn't include olives? Why do we need a Mahatzad? Say what's in common, let's include it in the common denominator. If seed, because it says a pasuk. It says by Shimshon Hagibar, he was so angry that they took his wife away. So he went ahead and he took all of these foxes and he tied the tails up and he put some fire there and he sent them off to the fields and burned all the fields. And the pasuk says there, and he burnt down from the granaries until the stalks that are growing, until the kedem of olives. Clearly that olives, are what should also called kedem. So that's good enough. When the Torah says kedem, working there, you can eat, maybe it means olives directly. You don't have to learn from anywhere else. So we never find olives referred to as kedem. When you have kedem zayis, okay, you have a descriptive term. Otherwise, just on its own, kedem means grapes. But my question really goes back. Maybe it's only limited to grapes and wheat and olives, and that's it. It says in Pasuk, when you enter your friend, back to Kiseitse, when it talks about employee eating, it says when you enter the come of your friend, and you'll pick it by hand, and it says they do not take a sickle and work on the stalks of your friend. So we dash from kol bar anything that requires a sickle, anything that requires a sickle, you can eat from. That's what we learn from there. Says the Gemara. The Mephoshim ask, the Shainim ask, grapes don't require a sickle, and yet an employee can eat. So some of the Shainim answer that the grapes have a small sickle, and therefore it's still considered a sickle. They didn't just pick it by hand; they had some kind of a little knife or something else that they were able to pick the grapes with. So there's a form of a sickle there. Says the Gemara. So you're learning from the word charmesh that it includes anything which requires a sickle. So there's a question. Charmesh, this very word charmesh, the baile, we need it to tell you the time. When can an employee eat from the fruits that are growing? Only b'shas charmesh, time of harvest, when you're cutting them down, when you're harvesting them. Achal eat. He shouldn't eat. So we need the word charmesh for another din altogether, not to tell you what kind of trees or fruits, but rather to tell you the time. That has to be fully ripe. Said Gemara, no. It says the passage, don't place it in your baskets, which means it's a time when normally people would put it in the baskets because it's ripe, and you shouldn't do that. Says the Gemara, okay, all we know is those things which require a sickle. But let's say legumes, things that grow from the ground. But what about things that don't grow from the ground? Let's say olives, dates. You don't use a sickle for that. So how do you know that an employee is allowed to eat from those things as well? There's a pasuk where it says comma. Again, it says comma. It says when you enter the what do you call it? Your friend's thing over there. Don't put the sickle. Don't use the sickle there. Al comma seyacha. The rabbis called bali comma. So we learn from there that anything that grows, any stalk that grows, is included in this law that an employee can eat from. Says the Gemara, but you just said before, you said before that comma from a Gzeira Shav is limited only to things which are chayiv chala. Now you're learning from the word comma that means anything that grows from the ground. Says the Gemara, you're right. That Gzeira Shav, I thought, hanimili mekame de neise charmish. That's before I knew the thing about the sickle. Now that I have the thing about a sickle, and Israel called over charmish. So I learned out from there that anything, because I know the time el kel yichol. So what I do with charmish, anything that requires a sickle, you can go ahead as an employee and eat from. Even though you're not chayiv in chala. So if someone asks this, so what about things that don't require a sickle? I'll use the comma for that. Otherwise, I have no other purpose for the word comma. The rabbis call baalei comma. So anything that grows, you're an employee. When it's ripe, you can eat from it while you're picking it. Says the Gemara, so now that the nafkalon mecharmish and mekama, we learn out from charmish and from kama that anything. First, we start with anything that requires a sickle. Then we take the next word kama, say anything that grows, an employee can eat from. Is kisavei bekedem echalomli. So why highlight a vineyard? It's anything that grows. So why does the Torah say kisavei bekedem? We learn out a number of dinim from that very pasuk. Kiritanya, we learned kisavai. It says when you arrive, nemakan. It says it bia. It says it when you come into the field. V'nema lahalam, and it says in another pasuk that when you hire an employee, you should pay them straight away and don't let the sun lay savai olav Hashem. You don't want the day should be over, the sun should set, and you haven't paid me yet. So what do we learn from this? How do we know we're talking about an employee? All it says is when you enter your friend's vineyard, maybe it means any stranger can walk into somebody's vineyard and eat. How do we know we're talking about an employee? So we learn out from the word kisavoy, and there it says loy savoy. When it talks about employee, make sure you pay their wages on time. So malahalon bepoila because we're talking about an employee. I've kind of we're talking about an employee. Bekedem li'echa. Then it says bekedem of your friend. The loy bekedem kusi, but not the vineyard of a guy. Big machlek is showing him how to understand the Gemara here. Rashi learns, and many are showing like Rashi, that it means we would have thought that the prohibition. So let's first learn Rashi. We would have thought the prohibition of not placing them in your basket only applies to kedem riacha, to a Jewish owner. But if it's a non-Jewish owner, maybe not only are you permitted to pick, but you can actually take them in your basket and bring them home for your family. So the Gemara says, Hanicha, that would make sense if that's why it says Re'echa, Leman, according to the opinion that Gezel Kusi Osa. Remember, we had a big argument we'll have in Sanhedrin of the test, but we also had already Bava Kama, a big argument if you're permitted to steal from a goy. Now, truth of the matter is the Gemara Bava Kama, which Rashi alludes to, talks about hafkas halva osik, which means you're not allowed to steal outright from a goy. It's also as well, Mahat Torah. It's talking about if you borrowed money, which means the money came to you legally, then if you can lie your way out and not paying back, according to one opinion, it's not forbidden, and according to other opinion, it is forbidden. But that's not stealing, because stealing is only if the money came into your possession illegally. But there's other places where we have a machlekes of gezel akum as mutter also, and it seems though according to many of the Rishonim, the one who says mutter means it's mutter completely, but nevertheless they say it's also not because of gzela, but because of chilul Hashem. The Gemara says, if you hold that you're not allowed to steal from a goy, so you need a pasuk to tell you, but if you're their employee and you're picking grapes, you're allowed to take some grapes home with you as well. Put them in the basket. But according to what it says, you're permitted to steal from a goy, so surely an employee who is working hard and he's working with it, surely he's permitted to take it home. I need a pasuk to tell me. So you want to ask, because you tell me that the gezel of a goy is also, so I need a pasuk, tell me you're permitted. I need to grow the mission. Tell me, pasuk you permitted. The one who holds it permitted. If you're permitted to steal, you got to tell me that a worker also can take it. What's going on here? So we answer mukilo we use the word to tell you, but you're not allowed to take hegdish and put it in the basket. Nor do we even give you permission to eat while you're picking grapes from hegdish. The Rishonim already have a problem. I don't need a pasuk for that. There's a thing called meila. You're not allowed to steal from hegdish. Even though you're an employee, you're not allowed to steal. Gabbai hegdish can't take from hegdish. You're a moyel. We had so many times before. So what's this over here? You know, pasuk tell you kenem li'echad, not hegdish. So they all try to find cases where you sort of donated to the base of Migdash, but there's no meila. For example, you say the value of this should belong. Kedusha's damim, not Kedusha's guf. Anyway, that's how Rashi most Rishonim learn. But other Rishonim learn exactly the opposite. They learn the Gemara is not talking about putting it in your keli. The Gemara is talking about as an employee, the way we learn right now, a goy is easier than bayid. But the others learn exactly the opposite. Whether an employee is permitted to eat while they're working. By Yid, you're permitted to work, but by a goy, maybe you're not. Maybe we're stricter with the goy. And the expression they use is because the goy does not have the mitzvah of helping out his employee, which sounds like that they learned is actually a mitzvah, which goes back to what we said before. They learned that even the conclusion of the Gemara, it's tzedakah. It's not a wage. It's a mitzvah for them. And what exactly the mitzvah is, either it's tzedakah or just a mitzvah that you have to, like tzar ba'al chayim, that you have to let him eat from the food, not because it's tzedakah, because he's staring at the food right in front of him, and it's so tempting, and you're not going to let him eat from it. Anyway, so they learn the Gemara exactly the opposite, and the Gemara says, and the Gemara's question is that if you hold that the gezel of the goy is forbidden, it makes sense why a yid employee cannot eat from it. But if you're allowed to steal from a goy, how can you tell me that a yid cannot eat from it? So their perspective is exactly the opposite. It's far stricter working for a goyish employer than for a Yiddish employer. Anyway, the Gemara continues. We learn from the pasuk further. The pasuk that you can eat, the lay mitzvah, but you're not allowed to squeeze out the juice and make wine out of it or something and drink it in a cup. Now, why not? Why not? So some of us say the reason why you can't is the problem is not the juice. The problem is when you squeeze the juice out, so what do you do with the skin? You throw it away. And the Torah says that whatever you take, you have to eat. So whatever is edible, you have to eat. It's one thing you eat, take an orange, you can't eat the peel. But since you could eat the skin, then the Torah says, you have to consume the entire thing that's edible. And if you're not, you have no heter to do it at all. That's what some want to say. Tosfos has another explanation here. Anovin grapes, it's one thing to allow you to eat grapes while you're picking it, but to take the grapes and dip it into something so that it makes it sweeter and tastier, so you eat more than you're entitled to, that you cannot do. Rashi actually said you take the grapes, you dip it into salt. I guess it was a delicacy in those days to take grapes and to dip it into salt. Have you anybody ever tried dipping grapes into salt and see what it's like? It seems that is a delicacy. Okay. Kenafshecha to your heart's desire. What means your heart's desire? Kenefesha balabayis. You are just like the balabayis. B'darshan nafshecha means like the balabayis. In what way? Kach nafshepel. You are the employees like the employer. Ma nafshecha oichel pata. The employer when they eat, they're exempt from giving Maisa because it's not, you haven't done Gemar Malacha yet. And we'll see later in the Gemara what's considered Gemar Malacha for these things that you chayiv Maisa. Is Av Poil Oifel Potter. The employee can eat and he's not chayiv Maisa. Why would you think otherwise? Because the employee can be considered like a purchaser. And we're going to see later that a purchaser has to give Maisa. So we would have thought that the employee is different than the employer. The employer owns it and he plans to do a few more stages of work with it to pile it up and everything else. But you're an employee, you're just like you're buying it, and therefore maybe you should give Maisa. Kamar Shalom, you don't have to. A purchaser has to, but not you. And we'll talk about a purchaser tomorrow. And even though it's not Gemar Malacha yet, as Rashi explains, because you bought it, you made it choshev, as if it's Gemar Malacha already. And then we finish off. Sivacha, you should be full, sated. The loy achila gasa, not if you're stuck. Because achila gasa, we already had a few times, is not considered achila. In fact, on Yom Kippur, if you eat and you're full, you're not liable for eating on Yom Kippur, because it's not considered eating. And then Tosfos explains the different stages of achila gasa. Anyway, you're allowed to eat, but not allowed to stuff yourself with someone else's grapes. Don't put it in your vessels. When can you eat? Only in the time when generally people are harvesting and putting things in a basket. But if it's not ripe yet, you cannot eat as an employee. Okay, we'll stop here. Now starts a new Gemara tomorrow.